I am proud to say Sunnyside is my first podcast sponsor. I wanted to partner with Sunnyside because they are on a mission to help people change their relationship with alcohol, and so am I. Sunnyside makes it easier to decide when you want to drink or not by helping you set weekly goals and get daily motivation. Sunnyside helps you plan and track your drinks, and they're offering the Peripeteia podcast listeners a risk-free trial. So do me a favor and go to sunnyside.co/DTD to grab your free trial from the #1 moderation app in the US, Sunnyside. Again, that's www.sunnyside.co/DTD. Thanks, Sunnyside. Hi, babes. Listen up. You landed here at the Peripeteia podcast, and I'm so glad to have you. Enjoy these real girl talk conversations about the things that matter. From the ordinary to the extraordinary and every plot twist in between, I welcome you. Life has a way of throwing us curveballs, and these are the stories of female resilience while navigating change with newfound purpose. This is Peripeteia. I'm so glad you're here. Let's embark on this journey together. Here we go. Hi, Celeste. Welcome to the Peripeteia podcast. I'm so glad that you're here. I've been a fan of yours since day one, I think. I don't know. I think you're an excellent writer. I'm in love with your writing. You're the author of It's Not About the Wine, The Loaded Truth Behind Mommy Wine Culture. You've also been a marketing professional and, of course, a mom. And a lot of your work is around sobriety, but also the mental load of motherhood. And so I know that's what we're going to discuss today, and specifically mothering children with special needs. And I want to thank you in advance for your openness because I can't think of a more tender topic to talk about. So I appreciate you. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Heather. And I'm really excited to talk about something that we don't talk about a lot, certainly not in sobriety spaces, but in motherhood or parenting in general. So I think it's timely, it's interesting, and it's generally not something that we have conversations about.
Yeah, motherhood, favorite topic of mine. And I'm glad we've gotten to meet in person too at the She Recovers conference in Chicago. So I feel personally connected to you, having had lunch together, and oh my gosh, your support and setting up a booth and all that good stuff.
Sorry.
Can you take us back and start from the beginning? Can you share a little bit about your child and your children and their condition and what they were diagnosed as, and kind of how you recognized that you were a parent of children with special needs?
Yeah, I am a mother of two neurodivergent children. Which is funny to say because I didn't even really know the true definition of neurodivergence probably 7 or 8 years ago. So much has changed, in this journey. I have 2 kids, ages 8 and 10, and what I realized pretty early on with our first child was something was different, and we were getting notifications from preschool that this something wasn't something people liked or wanted to see. It was problematic. It was behavior issues, a lot of finger pointing, a lot of blaming, a lot of you need to attend this parenting class. You need to read these parenting books. Like it really felt like my husband and I were the issue at bay. Certainly not the kids, and still not the kids. But we took it to heart, and we really carried that that blame and felt like we were completely failing in our parenting, just simply based on how teachers and administrators were speaking to us on our oldest child's problems. And, when I look back on some of these problems, we're talking about behavioral issues with a 3-year-old. Things that make me shake my head now in disbelief at the amount of shame that I felt like we carried around this without even considering what alternative reasons might be for some of this behavior. And I recognize teachers and administrators probably see the whole spectrum of different parenting, but it would have been nice to get the benefit of the doubt a little bit in these earlier days. Uh, when this started happening, when my oldest was 3, I went to the doctor, the pediatrician, and I told him what was going on. I was scared. I genuinely did hold on to a lot of this struggle internally. People were telling me this was my issue to deal with, and I believed them, but I also wanted a professional's opinion. And when we talked to the doctor, he said, based on the behavior you're telling me, your child's too young for us to even test him for anything. What I can specifically say to you is children like this need structure, consistency, and routine. And it was in that moment really when my heart dropped because up until then, I didn't know what I was doing wrong as a mom. But when he said that, I innately knew that my drinking was keeping me from providing any of those 3, not to the ability I could be providing them. I could not offer him consistency, structure, and routine when I was constantly several glasses of wine deep or dealing with a hangover. It was hard enough for me to regulate myself, let alone try to regulate what might be a neurodivergent child. So that was such a call to action moment for me. And of course, I did not quit drinking that day because it takes time to let things settle in your head and its way out. But that was one of the very first aha moments I had that led to my sobriety, which would happen about a month later. And it was very profound for me. We wouldn't get my child's autism diagnosis for several more years. But when we did, I was several years sober. I was able to provide consistency, structure, and routine. And we felt good about the way we were showing up, the way we were parenting, how we could best support our children. So we could immediately take that off the table. And it felt really, there's a lot of conviction in knowing what was going on versus what we knew wasn't going on. And I'm genuinely grateful for my sobriety in those early years when we didn't know. We didn't know the origin story of what some of these behaviors were coming from.
Wow. That is so powerful. So, first of all, special needs versus neurodivergent. Are those different things? Are those the same things? Is one appropriate and one not? Can you educate me a little bit on that?
Yeah, I am certainly not an expert in the verbatim. When I talk about a child with special needs, I generally talk about my oldest child who needs accommodations. He's on an IEP at school. He works with an ABA therapist. He sees a psychiatrist. I mean, he has special needs. He has individualized needs. Versus when I talk about children neurodivergence, I am sometimes referring to my younger child who has ADHD, but he does not have an IEP. He doesn't even have a 504. We recognize that his brain works a little bit differently, but he is able to show up in a standard school setting and do well.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes sense. So this is very interesting because you're a new parent, and what new parent, I mean, none of us know any of it, right? There's not the manual for any of us. So we're all doing the best we can, and we're all not doing it perfectly. And we know that. And there's nothing we care more about than this. There's nothing we want to be good at more than mothering. It matters so much to us. So I know for me, it's the thing I would be the most defensive about, right? Because I care so much about that. And then when your little one, your first one, is 3 years old. I mean, first of all, I always say 3 year olds are the cutest they're ever going to be and the most terrible they're ever going to be just by the age of being three, right? They are so, I think it's the cutest age. And it's, horrible because they're trying to assert their independence. And, you really have to practice patience during those 3 year old years. But you don't have another 3 year old with your first. So you don't know what's normal or not normal or what's age related and developmental related and your child's personality and what is something that's more concerning. But when there's behavior issues at preschool, you're looking to those teachers and administrators to be the experts because they've seen other 3 year olds. They know their school in the behavior of 3 year olds, and they're telling you something's wrong with your parenting. And you're believing them because you don't know anything different. And the first finger to point is at yourself, I'm sure, your own worst critic, like we all are. And then when you take your child to the pediatrician, he says, there's no diagnosis, but here's some things that can help. And you're able to recognize maybe there is something you can do. Mhm. That's a real surrender, Celeste. I mean, that's like a fall to your knee. I'm proud of you for looking at that. You say it took a month to quit drinking. I feel like I knew that, and then it took me a lifetime to quit drinking.
When I got those words from the pediatrician, it felt genuinely empowering, even before I connected it to my drinking, because it felt like something I could actually do, something I could actually do differently. Whereas with the admins and the teachers telling us to read parenting books and go to parenting classes, we were doing everything the parenting books were telling us to do. We were absorbing as much information as we could on the parenting style and strategies and discipline that the preschool was recommending and using. So that felt really frustrating because we're implementing exactly what you have told us to, and you're still pointing the finger at us, blaming us. That felt exhausting, but also like there was genuinely nothing more we could do. It did not feel helpful. Whereas the pediatrician's advice was so basic, bare bones. Um, I felt like it was something that any even great parent could do better.
Mhm.
Consistency, structure, routine, that is something we could probably all work on developing. I can work on that for myself probably every day for the rest of my life and still never be perfect at it. So I think when you have a child who is showing unique behavior, or you're worried about with whether it's anxiety or anything that kind of sets them apart, all of a sudden you have to go into this deep dive of learning about things you have never known anything about before. And I have learned so much about neurodivergence and um, autism and ADHD and activism and IEPs and 504s. I mean, like, I have this whole dictionary of new words that I had to learn about based on what we were discovering about our children that I had no idea. This doesn't come in the parenting books. Nobody's expecting this. And yet, no one else is going to advocate for our kids. It's it's my job. It's our job. And it's probably my hardest and most important job. So when I became a mom, I didn't expect this new learning curve. But now that I'm here and with the diagnosis, it does create this huge opportunity to be an expert on our children in a way that we couldn't be without understanding the why.
Yeah. I love that too, because you've grown into it's not the teachers, the administrators, or the doctors that's the expert on your child, it's you.
Yeah.
And so that's beautiful thing to grow into. So the structure, I love it. Like structure, consistency, routine. I mean, that's basically your recipe for sobriety, also, the beginning. Am I right?
Right.
And so, what were some of those things that you immediately implemented in addition to evaluating your own drinking in your family life or in your parenting? Do you recall?
I mean, it was a while ago, but I do remember, as far as routine, we did write down a structured routine and we started talking to our child about it. At first, we thought he was too young to understand basic routines. He was only 3, but as a child who does not like surprises, who doesn't like being caught off guard, it was really important to set him up each day to succeed by telling him what the plan was. No surprises. Even the day before, tomorrow you're going to grandma's house. Tomorrow we're having a family party, and here's the expected behavior. And here's what's going to happen if you decide to wander off, or if you get angry. Like, this is what we're going to do, and just kind of provide those loving boundaries.
Yeah, guardrails.
That Yeah, that our child knew what to expect and what kind of behavior he could go into it with versus what will make us leave the environment. Uh, that's really where we started a lot of those conversations that I don't think we were having before.
Yeah, that's great. And then it would be what, 3 years later where he would get an official diagnosis? Is that what I'm hearing? And what was you and your family, how did you react to that? How did that feel to you?
At first, we really resist the autism diagnosis. I think because I was so uneducated, I didn't know what that meant. It just felt so unfamiliar. When I thought of autism, I thought of Rain Man.
Yeah, I was gonna
And
say, I'm sure we all have, a stigma or
yeah,
a movie in our same as, like, alcoholism, what that looks like.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So my child doesn't look anything like what I perceived autism to be.
Mhm.
So when we first had a doctor come back to us and say he suspected autism and to get more tests, we kind of brushed it aside and said, okay, time for a second opinion. And we got a second opinion that this was ADHD and a myriad of other acronyms, but not autism. And we were like, okay, we're going to run with this. And we started going through what a child with these types of neurodivergence needs. And we started working with the school on a 504, which is like a level down from an IEP. And that was the beginning. It wouldn't be till a year later when we were still struggling. We were still having trouble with school behavior, tantrums, those things, that we went to another doctor who specialized in autism, and the waiting list to get these diagnoses such as autism, I think, was over a year. So by the time we got the autism diagnosis from somebody who could diagnose with autism, it was probably a year and a half after the original diagnosis. But by then, I think we knew this is absolutely what's going on. And we had better education around it and better understanding of the different levels of autism, how They always say, if you know one person with autism, you know one person with autism.
Mhm.
We've learned so much in these days, and it, like I said, when we got his autism diagnosis, I wasn't scared at all. I wasn't upset at all. I felt even further empowerment. Like, okay, we know what's going on. Let's go. Mhm. Mhm.
What a model you are, Celeste, of flexing your ideas and when presented with new information, being able to evolve and change your mind. What initially felt like, oh, hell no, that's not it. You're wrong. You allowed yourself to grow into that over time. I think that's a lesson for everybody listening in anything that you were able to do that. I mean, you were able to do that by hearing your pediatrician different than the teachers and by allowing and continuing to research this diagnosis until it did feel right to you. So, where's your child's behavior? I mean, I'm hearing tantrums, wandering off.
Explosive behavior, inability to stay regulated. His response when things didn't go his way felt very not aligned with what didn't go his way. And then social cues. Social cues in general were extremely challenging. He wasn't making eye contact. He wouldn't say hi to people. And this infuriated people. I mean, it blows my mind now too, like how upset people would get that our child is so rude. He doesn't say hi and bye to them. He doesn't make eye contact with them. And, at the time, I was like, okay, well, we can work on that. And now to be like, I mean, this is like one of the key factors of autism.
Mhm,
It's gonna be harder for my child to do some things. And we will always work on it.
mhm,
I don't give him a permission slip not to try to say hi and bye to people. And I just need to prompt him. I have to
mhm,
prompt him on a lot of things that people don't need prompts in at his age. It was a lot of little things, but it was things that can and did have severe impact on his ability to adjust in school, his ability to have a relationship with his brother. I mean, there was multiple things that impeded his day-to-day functioning that he needed help with, still does.
mhm. Yeah, daily challenges, definitely. How did you manage this? I mean, I imagine with an explosive child, I mean, your nervous system gets dysregulated immediately if you're me, anyways. When my child is out of sorts, then my intensity level gets high fast too, right? And then how about the relationship between you and your spouse, parenting? Were you guys on the same page? Did this create conflict between you of how to manage things, how to deal with things?
It is very hard to stay regulated, and I've learned that I am such a conflict adverse person, and I am raising a conflict thriving child. My child loves to be confrontational.
Stir that pot.
He thrives
Yeah.
in stirring people up,
Mhm,
and I am the exact opposite. So it is so out of my comfort zone. He has taught me so much,
mhm,
not only about myself, but about things I need to change about myself. And also, he on the daily provides me reminders why alcohol would make this so much worse.
yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, I
So
hate to credit him, but he also got you sober.
yeah, and he keeps me sober. But I can also see why so many parents or children on the spectrum or general neurodivergence do turn to alcohol and drugs to numb out because this is a nonstop fight or flight feeling. That's for some people raising children with special needs will never, they're forever parents. So
Mhm,
I totally understand that. But I also realized that for me, it was the worst thing I could do for myself and for my kids. As far as the parenting, it's something we still struggle with. It's really hard to find the balance between the way our parents raised us and what we think our children need.
Mm.
And I think that is a conflict that a lot of partners deal with when you are talking about children who think differently.
Mhm, and in partners were raised differently also, right? And perhaps each
Absolutely.
think they were the right way or the wrong way, either way, wanting to do something the same or different. Yeah, so there's a natural difference of opinions with all of that, sort of escalated to a whole new intensity when a child with special needs and things are a little extra challenging anyways.
I read a book, Forever Boy by Kate Swenson, uh, and she said this startling statistic about the percentage of partners with a child on the autism spectrum who get divorced. I mean, it's something, and I don't want to say the number because I'll be making it up, but it was something to the extent that I was like, wow, we are, in the vast minority of still being together
Yeah,
because this is so challenging. Yes.
super hard, super hard. But you're doing it, you're still doing it, and you're a united force even when you're not. So that's that's also commendable. How do you balance caring for your child and then also tending to yourself in your marriage?
It's really hard.
You're like, I don't. I take my marriage. He lives here.
Yeah, I see him sometimes. Um, we wave when
Right?
when we pass
Tears with
each
our
other.
makeup in the morning.
Um, it's been really hard. My husband's the primary breadwinner. So, a couple years ago, we made the really hard decision, that I would step down from my job. I was in corporate marketing for 20 years and be home, to essentially constantly be available and on call. I'm basically an on-call 24/7 mom. That's kind of what I mean, every mom is an on-call 24/7 mom, but there's no debate or argument between me and my husband of who's gonna stay home when a kid's sick, of who's
Mm.
gonna pick up a child when he's having a bad day, those kinds of things. There's no question, that's my job. That's my job now. That's my job in the near future, until things change because days are so unpredictable. Even now, I mean, we're talking, what, 4, 5 years into the diagnosis, and I expect a phone call from school anytime, at any time during the day. If I don't get a phone call from school, it's a small miracle.
Mhm.
I genuinely am grateful for those days, but I'm always ready, and I think that's what we are so privileged that I can do that. And I work when I'm home. I do little things, I did my book. I,
Which
was
is not a little thing, by the way.
I wrote a little book. I do little passion projects that are certainly not they're not paying the bills per se, but they are things that bring me so much joy,
Mhm.
that I can do for myself when, time allows itself,
Mhm.
essentially. And that's where my life is at right now. And sometimes it cuts deep, and other times I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful because I get to have this front seat for my children. I get to be their greatest advocate, but I also get to be their biggest cheerleader and the first person they go to for anything. And that brings me so much joy
Mhm.
because I love them more than anything.
Yeah, because it's the world's most important gem, like we said. I was going to ask you to describe a typical day, but I'm hearing there is no typical day. But what would be typical is getting a call from school and having to drop everything to run. And just so our listeners know, when we had a little call to prep this call,
Yeah.
you were in the middle of that school run, right? So It's, yeah, it can come up at any time. I also just wanna say, Eve, Rodsky, my queen of fair play, and, like, just because it's unpaid work doesn't mean it's not valuable work, and I can't think of
Absolutely.
more valuable work than raising children. So I'm definitely with you on that. It is a privilege and it is hard and it is all the things, but so important. And there's no paycheck for that. If there was, it's a lot. I mean, if we did our hourly rate, right, and all the chauffeuring and the tutoring and the cooking and the wellness and the carpool and all the things, it would be a pretty expensive job. What support do you have? Do you have support systems, family, friends, or community resources that have been helpful to you?
Yeah. So my mom has been probably, she's almost like a third parent. She is always available and she has this very special relationship with my oldest. Um, they are very close. So we feel really blessed to have that. We just moved her into an in-law space in our house. So she is living with us now with some boundaries.
Mhm.
And I'm really grateful for that because when my child needs to de escalate, sometimes he just needs grandma. I mean, it's sometimes that's what it comes down to. So uh, we're really lucky that we have her and she's available and willing and they are so close. We also have been working with an ABA therapist for, I mean, since the pandemic, so 4 years now, who is not only our um, ABA therapist for both kids, but she is our IEP advocate for my oldest. She knows the kids extremely well, and we talk to her about just about anything and everything. So that's been extremely helpful. The best one of the great benefits of getting the autism diagnosis is it really opens the doors for insurance coverage. And so the ABA therapy we were receiving is almost 100% covered now with that autism diagnosis. So that's been a huge benefit. She also can join my oldest in the classroom and help him one on one several hours a week. So there's been a lot of support there. And then, of course, our school system has been a lifeline to us. He has a whole IEP team. Um, we have a principal right now who knows him so well and she wants to see him thrive. It is a beautiful thing. And I'm heartbroken because we are going to be switching schools for him in the new year because our team agreed that he needs some specialized support that his current school can't offer him. But it's a really rare thing to come across a principal or school admin who gets it and who wants to build that relationship uh, with a child who sometimes has a will of his own. So feeling really blessed and grateful for that team and hoping and praying we can find new support systems as life changes because it always does.
Mhm. And what have you encountered barriers to accessing services?
We've encountered a lot of barriers in general. As far as access goes, I think one of the hardest parts can be for people who have children with special needs is financially, especially if you don't have a diagnosis yet, but also these wait lists. I mean, being able to access a doctor, being able to schedule an autism evaluation or any evaluation can take months, if not years, depending on where you live. And when you are dealing with day to day struggles at your school, or if your child was just kicked out of school, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've just gone to bed crying because, like, what are we even going to do tomorrow? We can't wait a year for a diagnosis before we can move forward with getting support. So, There's some real challenges with um, those types of things. And I guess my advice to anybody who is in the murky middle there, who may be struggling at the current school but has nowhere else to go, is to look around and to ask questions and to find a group like Autism Speaks. There are organizations throughout, national or local, that offer resources to help and to support us on this journey that don't cost money. And hopefully, if they don't have the answers, they will know someone who does. Mm. Well,
Great advice. So, how do you advocate for your child, like with the educational system or the medical system or in social settings when he doesn't say hi or make eye contact and appears rude to a stranger? What are some of the best ways you've been able to advocate?
depends on the person. Some people want to be educated, some people don't. Some people want to be in control and they're not interested in learning more. And that's fine. We've had this struggle between school settings and even family and home settings. Some people think an autism diagnosis is an excuse for bad behavior. I mean, we have heard it all in the few years of our experience with this. And I have made a lot of peace with understanding to each his own. But there are times where I have to get mama bear on people. I had to do that this summer. We got kicked out of a summer camp because I didn't like the way an admin spoke to my care. And I said that, and they they didn't want to understand. They didn't want to have the conversation. It was very authoritarian. Like I'm the big boss. Everyone needs to listen to me. It wasn't a conversation, and so we had to leave that summer camp. So it still happens, and it probably, I suppose, it always will be an issue. But I really had this moment this summer with that whole situation where I was like, I could, I could bow down and be like, "You're right," and walk away, which is what my conflict avoidant person self wants to do in just
Right.
about every setting.
Yeah.
Or I can show my kids that when someone doesn't treat them right, I've got their back. And so I felt like for me, it wasn't about the summer camp, right? It wasn't even about this person. It was about my kids knowing I've got them, when, and we have rules in our family. And one of the rules is I won't let people talk to you this way. Just as with my kids, I won't let them talk to each other a certain way. I'm not going to let somebody else talk to you this way, especially when you are still young and can't defend yourself. So when I stood up to an adult who I felt like was being severely disrespectful, it was really hard and really scary. But I'm proud of that. I'm proud I get to do that. I'm proud I get to be that person, as hard as it is and as uncomfortable as it is. And you know what? I don't think I would have ever done that if I was still drinking. I think I just would have drank at the problem.
To stand up and let your kids see it. And mom to mom, I'm a proud mom of a child that was also kicked out of preschool. So you're right. You are not alone. We are never alone.
I love it.
Yeah.
And when you're going through it, it feels like you are the only people who have ever done this, who have ever been through this. It feels very lonely and isolating. But to know that this happens to a lot of people feels like In the same way that you go into a sober meeting and you're like, "Oh my god, other people have been through this too." It feels so, it just the grace that enters your system, there's nothing like it.
Yeah, and the secrecy and the shame of it is, dissipated when shared out loud, right? So, yeah, you are not alone. How do you take care of your own emotional and mental health now while caring for your child?
I don't.
How come I
Um,
don't? Yeah, I'm late coach, you know? Listen, I got 3
smart.
elementary call, please schedule with me, so that's
I know.
your homework assignment.
Time to talk.
Yeah.
Uh, I do multiple things to take care of myself. I prioritize my therapy. I have therapy right after this interview. I prioritize exercise. I can't do it daily. I wish I could do it daily. I can't do it daily, but I strive for 2 to 3 times a week. And my family knows that's a priority for me. I also prioritize writing, whatever kind of writing it is. Right now, I'm working on a fiction book, which is so out of my comfort zone and element. But it's been really fun. And, it's just going into it with no expectations, no even assumption that anybody else will even read this. It just
Yeah.
feels like I'm just having fun.
Yeah.
And that feels really good. And then I told you before we started recording that I'm going to go off on a sober retreat tomorrow. I do try to do things regularly, and it gets easier to schedule these things as the kids get older, because, for several years, it wasn't an option. Taking a vacation without kids wasn't an option. Me going on a sober retreat wasn't an option. And now these doors are kind of opening to me, and it feels really good, and I take advantage of it.
I love it. I love it that you're taking it now that it is available. And I love what you said about exercising, like you'd like to do it every day, but 2 to 3 times a week is, reasonable or what works. And then not beating yourself up on the days you don't do it for not doing it. That's what I've just recognized about myself. Like, it's great to have ideals, it's great to have goals, but it's the way you approach yourself, in the realism of it. Like, I'm not going to beat myself because I didn't work out today because working out every day can't be a priority to me. There's other priorities as well, right?
That's not the era I'm in right now.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if the 5 balls in the air every day, you get to pick 3 or 2,
Right.
if you get a call from school, then maybe just once.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Um, how do you prepare for your children's future as they grow older? You've kind of alluded to that. There's a little more space for you. You're finding yourself with a little more freedom. What does it look like for them and for you?
I it's I try not to think too far ahead. I don't necessarily know what to expect. If you had told me this time last year that we would be switching schools midway through the year of my child's last year in elementary school, I would have told you that's the dumbest thing I ever heard. But new information,
Cool.
new resources, and advice and suggestions from your team is going to lead to changes in the way you think.
Mm,
So I feel like it's constantly changing, it's constantly evolving. The one thing I have learned with both my kids is never to put any sort of premonitions or what I expect from them essentially uh, over them, because they are their own people doing their own thing. And they're going to build their own lives. I think you have these visions of what your child will be when you are pregnant or even before that. And then they come and, I pictured myself being a soccer mom. I pictured myself being a basketball. I don't know. I pictured myself having these really sports oriented kids, because that's how I was.
mm.
And I have kids who my oldest wouldn't touch a ball with a 10-foot pole, um, let alone be on a soccer team. He doesn't do well with team sports. And it's a hard pill to swallow when you realize that that was my vision. That was my dream. That's not his dream. And kind of setting those expectations aside and opening yourself up to the possibilities that they are genuinely endless and they are completely out of your control. So I have kind of let go of what this might look like or be like, even in a couple years. Like, I don't know if I will still be at home in a couple years or if life will open opportunities back up for me to work again. I'm taking it one day at a time in
Yeah.
every sense.
Yeah. That sounds good. No hope, no concern, just in the here and now. Also, I love, and I have to tell myself and plenty of clients, you parent the children you have, not the children you want,
Right.
right?
And
And
I
so,
think we've all tried to
yeah.
parent children we thought they'd be, and it never goes well. There's a lot of pushback for good reason. I do not have people pleasing kids. Neither of my kids are going to do something because they think it'll make me happy. And while that makes me really uncomfortable as a people pleaser myself, it also excites me because these are not kids who are going to cave into peer pressure,
Mhm.
knock on wood. These are not kids who are going to let someone treat them poorly in a relationship or in a career when they're older. Like they know how to speak up when they're angry. They know how to stand up to things that upset them. And that thrills me because I didn't have that. I still don't in some ways. So they are very different than me. And in that way, I just have to get out of their way.
Yeah, I hear you. I got one that speaks her mind and always has. It's like, as a people pleaser myself, it's like, oh my God.
What about your teacher think? I don't kind of
Yeah.
I probably think that 4 or 5 times a day. Like, oh my God, what's the teacher gonna think?
Yeah, she probably thinks he's wonderful, just like you, right?
You know
What
what?
advice would you give to other parents who are just beginning their journey with a special needs child? And if you can touch on these two questions, the relationship between brothers when one's needs are more than the other, and kind of how that works.
Advice I would give to someone with a special needs child or who suspects they have a special needs child is to find people to talk to. Now, that can be a community, and you can probably find a community on Facebook. I just looked up special needs advocacy and special needs parenting in my local community, and there's several groups that I joined, but you can also find it through some of these larger organizations like Autism Speaks. Look them up, find other parents doing what you're doing because they are the ones who have been through what you're going through or about to go through, and they can give you the advice or just make you feel less alone. And that is such a powerful resource in these early days when it feels like you can't do anything right, when it feels like nobody understands, when even your doctor is looking at you like there's nothing I can do. That's what you can do now. You can get educated and you can find people who have been through this.
How good for you for this unique journey, right?
100%.
Mhm.
Super important. There's even, there are groups that, like Sober Mom Squad, we have a subgroup on parenting children with special needs. I mean, if you look around, I think you'll be surprised with what's out there. There's also a ton of people on social media who talk about this. So you could also just do some searches on your favorite social media platform and find people who are having these conversations about what it's like raising a child with special needs. The second question around siblings. This is one of the more challenging parts of this. And for my husband and I think the most important thing we have done is making sure our younger child gets the same amount of attention the same amount of extracurriculars, and as best we can. There's going to ebb and flow when a different child has more needs than the other child. When you have a child who has a lot of extra needs, it can feel like they get all the attention. But with my husband and I, we have really worked hard to make sure our youngest knows there are times consistently where she only gets our attention. We've done this with a weekly date night where at once a week we switch kids and I take one child, my husband takes the other, and we have a date with them. And we do that every single week and we have for years. And it's something our kids look forward to. And it reminds them that we have their backs, because you do hear a lot about a sibling of a child on the spectrum or otherwise who feels like they got the short end of the stick. And I never want my kids to feel like that. But we're just doing the best we can.
Cool. Yeah, that's a lot. And individual relationship with each child and each parent versus the collective or the group thing is a special addition
Yeah.
to that. Special
The other
time.
thing we do that I think has just been so good for our relationships with the kids is we switch nights every night with our children. I'll read to one child, my husband will read to the other child, and then we lay with them for a little bit. And we have done that probably since they were born, since the day they were born, essentially. So they get special time with us. They get the individual time with us, and it's fair. Like that's a big argument at our home. That's not fair. We're trying to be as fair as we can. We're trying to make it as equal as we can, and we do the best we can.
Mhm. Yeah. And understanding that things change, right? And ebb and flow in needs. And in
Yeah,
this moment, it might be on one, and in the next moment, it might be back on you, depending
exactly.
what's going on. Everything's not all fair all the time. Right.
No, it can't be.
Right. Right. Final question. How has your experience as a parent of a child with special needs changed your perspective on life?
I think as a mom, I have learned to let go of this desire to control outcomes, people, feelings, other people's opinions of me. I do think that has really intensified with raising kids with special needs, through a lot of the conflict we've experienced, through a lot of the challenges, the school transitions, things that probably most parents of neurotypical kids don't generally deal with. It really has added to this understanding that most of it is out of my control. And my goal is to ride the waves, to stay on the surfboard. And sometimes I don't, sometimes I fall off. I'm human, but I'm always going to get back up. And I want my kids to know I will always get back up. I will always be there, as best as I can, through the ups and downs of it. But a lot of these ways are way beyond my control. And that's okay. And that doesn't make me a bad mom. That doesn't make them bad kids. That's just how life goes. And my job is to learn how to take this one day at a time, to stay as emotionally regulated as possible, and to teach my kids how to as well.
A beautiful lesson, and it has forced you to be your best version of self. I mean, it's taught you all the things, all the life lessons like any challenge does. I think everything's like sobriety because, of course, I do.
Yeah.
But truly, you've taken the higher road, the path to enlightenment yourself and to addressing the lessons as they're coming your way, facing the wave and staying on your board, right? As best you can. I think that has evolved you into your best version of you. That's really beautiful, Mama. Thank you for sharing with us.
Thank you. I so appreciate getting to talk more about this topic because it's an important one.
So important. So I know my listeners, so many of my clients, do have kids with special needs, and it is a unique challenge, and everyone needs a unique support group for that. Not to mention the mother load, the literal mental load of motherhood is so much. So we need to talk more about it. So thank you
Yeah.
for sharing it with us. It's not about the wine, everybody. Buy her book, The Loaded Truth Behind Mommy Wine Culture. She's a beautiful writer. I can't wait to read the fiction book when and if that becomes available for public eyes. I have a guest coming up who's written a nonfiction fiction and then switched to fiction. So hopefully you'll tune in to that too. But so good to connect with you. Have a beautiful therapy appointment today. Thank you for sharing with us, Celeste.
Thank you, Heather.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of the Peripeteia Podcast, a talk show for women. The Peripeteia Podcast is sponsored by Sunnyside. I could not ask for a better partner. Thanks, Sunnyside. And don't forget to download my free ebook, The 12 Truths to Change Your Life. Do it for the plot. We'll see you in the next episode. Lots of love.